Welcome to In the Zone with Chris Zander, where we talk lifestyle, entrepreneurship, self-care, and much more. So go grab a drink or a snack and come on back because it is now time to get in the zone. My guest today is one of Nashville's most influential entrepreneurs. Just to name a few of her titles, she is the co-founder and managing director of Nashville Fashion Week, the CEO of Roar Nashville. She currently serves as the senior advisor for How Nashville Moves. Here to discuss it all and more is Marcia Masulla. How are you doing, Marcia?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've already talked so much before we even started filming, but I want to ask you about this because you're originally from St. Louis and you moved to Nashville in 2008. So I'm curious to know what made you make that move to Music City. Yeah, just tell us about that.
I giggle because it sounds like one of those country songs, and I'm not even a big country music fan, but it was like this gut feeling that kind of happened on a whim. So St. Louis was very good to me. I grew up there since the age of 5 and was very established. I had real estate at a very young age. I had a brick and mortar business. I was very embraced by the community and, like I said, established. And I was hosting a radio show and I met a boy in a band, very cute boy. And the band was traveling to Nashville for their label. And again, I was in fashion at that time. I had a brick and mortar store, was doing styling, editing, all of that stuff. And so I came along and was styling them for their shoot. We were in town for, I think, maybe 36 hours. And anyway, so we were there. They played a showcase, and we were long distance dating for maybe a few months.
Yeah.
It was still in that kind of fresh period. And I dropped them off. I think they were on their bus heading back and was driving back to St. Louis. And it was just this feeling in the gut of my stomach as I was driving back. And I'd had this feeling once before, right before I moved to downtown St. Louis and decided to open my store and kind of risk it all. It was that same damn feeling. And within moments, I picked up my phone, dialed his number, and I was like, what am I doing? And I called him. And again, we'd only been dating for months, long distance, which is 4 days in real life.
Yeah.
Right?
No, seriously.
Seriously. And I just said, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, did you forget something? What's going on? Everything good? And I'm like, I think I'm going to move to Nashville. And he's like, right. He's like, wow, what? And he's like, well, what about your place, your loft, your store? And I said, yeah, I know. I go, I think you should move with me there. And it was exactly what you did. Long pause. And I thought, yeah, he thinks I'm crazy. He's about to break up with me. Oh, boy. And he just waited a little too long, by the way. And he goes, all right, real nonchalant. And I'm like, all right. So it was maybe 6 months later, closed my shop, put my place on the market, and we were in Nashville. And let me just say this too. That sounds very romantic, right? It sounds like it's I don't know, a country song,
I want that life.
right, with a happy ending. But let me be clear. This was in 2008. So it was when the market crashed.
Yes.
Topsy-turvy. Things were hard. When I closed my shop, took a loss.
Yeah.
Put my place on the market. The housing market was not great.
That's right.
Took a big L there too. And again, I was very established in St. Louis. I came to Nashville and it sounded great. Oh, I'm starting fresh. It's one thing to be senior and then go back to being freshman on campus. My first few years were rough.
Really? So what happened? Because I did think about that when I noticed that you moved to Nashville in 2008. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was probably the hardest time to move here, you know?
You're girl, what were you thinking? Right? Let me be clear. It was a financial hit. I was I went from having a home that I owned and a business, and I was scraping by to renting a very small place here. My guy was on the road all the time. I went from having my name on a marquee sign
Yeah.
of a store to not being able to find a job folding T-shirts in Nashville.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hard. So, and again, let me say this. Nashville was fantastic because, St. Louis is a great place, but it's a gritty city. And I came here and everybody's like, hi, how are you? And I'm just like,
why are you so nice?
Why are you so nice? What's going on here? But it was also a place too where it was like, you got to prove yourself. Hi, but prove yourself. And so that took a minute. It definitely took a minute. And so, I had to do the work, and it was not easy. It took me a long time to get to where I am now. And I'm still working. I think I will forever see myself as the underdog.
And when you say the underdog, why do you say that? Because that is something that is often felt for some people. Especially when you work hard like you do. I want you guys to actually look up her resume, okay? Literally, so many great titles, so many different things that you've been able to accomplish since being in Nashville only in the last 15 years. So I'm curious to know, why do you say the underdog?
Yeah. Well, that question is deep. It's funny that it's not funny. It's interesting that you say that because, we joke that we got kind of deep before we even got on the mic and we're like, don't cry. This is the part where it gets deep for me. So, I am the embodiment of where I came from. And while it is a bit more polished now, I'm grown. I'm 44 years old now. Yes. Honey. Oh, yeah.
You're lying.
I am. I'm 44. It was real rough being an Asian kid when you're growing up, but now that I'm older, I'm like, the genetics.
That's right.
The melanin is in a good place now. It was worth being bullied as a kid. Okay. But I had a really devastating childhood. I really did. And it was something that I had a lot of shame for a very long time. I've opened up about it over the last few years. And it took a lot of work for me, both personally, and I think through the work that I've done through my nonprofit philanthropic efforts, but also some of the stuff I've did recently, which with me, like jumping off a cliff, like running for office. It's like forcing myself to talk about myself. I've done a really a big thing of sharing the stories about missions of, the nonprofits and the businesses I've worked with. And then me finally starting to open up about my story has been a challenge. It's been really hard for me, but it's also been therapeutic in ways and nurturing for myself in ways that I could never have dreamt, But yeah, my childhood was really interesting and I'm thankful for it now. But, I came from an immigrant family. Both of my parents have been gone for some time. They've both passed away, but my mother was Korean. She was the only one from her family that came over from South Korea. She married my father. Both of them were in the military. She was in the Korean military. My father was in the U.S. Army. My father's family had an interesting makeup, but he was Italian, Sicilian, as they would say.
That's why your hair is so beautiful, man.
That's why my last name is what it is. Masulla, everybody gets a little confused. I'm like, yeah, that's not Korean. And that's where kind of the tenacity, I think, and some of my attitude kind of comes from too.
My best friend's Italian, so I get it.
The passion. So, and my, we had we had a lot of domestic violence in our house. We had a lot of emotional violence, domestic violence, and there was a lot of shame with that. And most of that, I should say, not a lot of that, was directed towards the women in the household. I have a younger brother, but it was directed towards my mother. It was directed towards me. And my mother had cancer. She passed away when I was 11. And so my security, my hero, I lost. And so I had to grow up really quick.
Yeah.
Right. And, it wasn't a matter of how do I survive? It was like, oh, girl, you got to survive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because if you don't pick up the pieces for yourself, no one's going to do it for you.
Right. I mean, I literally thought, am I going to get out of this house like in one piece?
Yeah.
So, and there was that like demand of like, oh, this isn't going to happen to me. And so I made decisions, and I was not going to like go down.
Yeah.
And so that's why it stemmed from that, of being an underdog. And there were some other life experiences where I've had experiences myself with cancer. I've had my experience with violence with a partner before, early on in my age. And I have always, I think the one word I would use for myself is like, I'm resilient.
Yeah.
And I use this phrase, I started a fund, which really supports animals. But at the end of the day, I think the phrase that I use is I'm tiny but mighty, and it's like, you can judge me any which way you want. I think a lot of people can use that, but it's like, I'm going to go down with the fight.
Yeah.
And also I think the other thing you can do that is like, even the tiniest acts can make a mighty impact, So I use a lot of that in my everyday thinking. But again, I think there's another part of that of like, you say like titles. A lot of times people see my titles or my resume now, or they see like what I'm wearing, or who I roll with,
your
or
personality,
like my personality,
your beauty.
Well, thank you for that. Keep going. They see this package now, and there's assumptions made, and I'm like, you have no idea where I came from. But I also will say this, I take some responsibility with that, because for the longest time, I didn't share that story, And so now I'm at a place where, do I share it every day, and do I share it with everyone?
Yeah.
No, not necessarily. But I think for those that seek it, like if someone's listening to your podcast, or if someone asks me in an authentic way, then yeah, I'll share it. Or if I feel like, it's an appropriate time or someone needs it, then yeah. And I offer that in a lot of ways, through like mentorship, or through different friendships or relationships.
I love that. And one of the things that I must ask you about too, because when you moved to Nashville, then back in 2008, Nashville was totally different than what it is now.
That's right.
And at that time, all the things that you went through growing up, also being a minority here in Nashville in 2008, fighting for your space in this industry where there's not a lot of diversity, specifically here in Nashville. We're just seeing a lot of diversity over the past maybe 5 years. But I'm just curious to know, how did you fight to get to where you are today? Because again, that space there wasn't just readily available for you. So how did you have to fight to make that space available for you, despite the hardships that maybe you endured? Oh,
yeah, totally. I mean, it started even before that. I think I was so accustomed to it, even from like when I was a kid. Like, I remember getting accepted to fashion school, and my own father was like, you ain't going. Like, that's not real school. You're a girl. Like, I remember being a kid and my dad diminishing the fact that I was not going to carry on the last name because I was female.
Yeah.
Like, my value wasn't what my brother's value was because I was a woman. And so that fight started in my own household. And so that hardened me as a kid. And so that started. Or even, I think about that with little girls and little boys now. Like, it was ingrained in me from a kid. Like, even when I was born, my grandparents were upset that my dad married a Korean woman. In grade school, little boys, I remember their names still, pulling their fingers back with their eyes and calling me names, Chinese, Japanese, and, throwing stuff at me because I was like one of maybe 2 Asian kids. I went to a predominantly Black high school, and I was a cheerleader, go figure. I remember going to, we would travel, and we would go to like predominantly white high schools, and them talking trash to us and them giving me shit because they're like, why are you at a black high school? I could go through every cycle in my life and think about when I applied for my first business grant and them, turning me down. And then finally, I got my first grant.
Yeah.
Again, I remember every name. Mr. Kevin Wilson from the St. Louis Development Corporation taking a chance at me, and he was a black man.
Wow.
And giving me my shot. But I let me say this too. I remember everybody that said no and everybody that gave me shit. I can tell you their first name, their last name. I probably know their blood type, to be honest with you.
Ooh, they better not mess with you.
They
man.
better not. I remember the lunchbox they threw at me. But let me also be clear. I remember every person that gave me a shot. Because there were people, that gave me shots. And I'm not I'm a spiritual person.
Yeah,
I don't go to church every Sunday. Yeah. But there were angels along the way. There were people that uplifted me and that empowered me, and I remember them too. And those were people that, I think for me now, those are the people that I want to be moving forward. I want to be the person that I didn't have or that came up and stepped up for me. And so when you say like, when I didn't fit in or when I wasn't given opportunities, I don't want to be Debbie Downer in saying this, but we're in a time right now. I just posted something on my Instagram right now where a representative from Congress was just talking about we're fighting now for diversity, inclusion, opportunities at a federal level that are being diminished potentially, which are likely going to be diminished. We're seeing corporate programs going down the toilet drain, and it's like, those opportunities are going to become scarce and scarce. And so the fight's going to go on, and we're going to continue. We're seeing things happen, I think, but we're always going to continue that fight. And so whether you are Black, brown, gold, we've been upgraded, Asians, okay? Whether you are woman, man, something in between, trans, LGBTQIA+, disabled, whatever you are that doesn't conform to cis, white, male, whatever that society wants you to be, we got to stick together and we got to, unite and form forces, because it's always going to be a fight and a challenge to do that. And so I don't see that going anywhere soon. And that's not to be disingenuous or to be negative. I just think it's a reality. And so that's how I kind of see it. And so when I say underdog a lot, I say it in the sense where I never get comfortable. I never quite get comfortable. It's not to say that I don't enjoy life. It's not to say that there's not pleasantries and there's not joy in my life. But I always have one foot on the ground. And I know before we got on air too, I'm always looking peripheral.
Yes. And I get that heavily because you have to. You have to because of your experiences, and you're reminded constantly every day that you are on the back burner. You're in the back seat, right? So you have to kind of keep that one foot on the ground. Yeah,
totally. And I think too, I don't know. I think I'm just drawn to, it's so funny because it took a lot of me investing in myself with therapy and just I don't know, going on walks and getting sleep, basic human things that I didn't afford myself for the longest time, spending time with friends, eating well, because I was just such a workhorse. Different people do different things that are unhealthy, and sometimes it's, substances or it's other behaviors. And for me, and it's still a struggle, is I've thrown myself into very unhealthy cycles of an abundance of work.
Yes.
Right? We locked there. We locked eyes. And it's been, years and years of that. And it's very hard to sometimes catch that because it's so productive. And so sometimes I need to pull myself back. I just got off of this campaign of 5-6 months of nonstop work, which brought me joy and it was great. But now I'm like steadying myself and saying, okay, sis, like you need like the next, few weeks of just being a human. And with that being said too, it's like, I know I have to like charge up, so I have to suit up and continue to be effective as a person and effective to the community and the world at large because, there are so many of us underdogs out there.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, for us to continue to bark and be voices and to be there for each other, like, we have to make sure we take care of ourselves and each other.
Well, on a lighter note, I want to talk about this because earlier you talked about being in fashion, always having a love for fashion.
Oh my God.
Which leads to here. Nashville Fashion Week was established in 2010. And as the co-founder and managing director, can you talk more about your position and the influence as to why you crafted this space here in Nashville and the need for expression through fashion, through diverse communities?
So, when we started Nashville Fashion Week and the Nashville Fashion Forward Fund, again, like you said, so much has changed. Back then, I remember when we would travel or talk about Nashville Fashion Week, people would kind of like smirk, and think, oh, fashion in Nashville, and not really take it seriously. Yeah. Now, the community here at large knew. We felt it. We were like, look at this energy here. This is an epicenter of culture and life and entertainment. Like, we knew what was popping, but we weren't necessarily being, taken seriously outside of that. I remember going... Oh, Chris, I remember even going to New York Fashion Week.
Yeah.
And it was almost like... I would mention, oh, I'm from Nashville Fashion Week. And it would be kind of that look of like, oh, that's cute, right?
Uh-huh.
And I would feel the shade and I'd be like, oh, you think that's funny? Okay. Or we would pitch designers and some would get it and they would come. There would be early adopters and they would come and they would be like, oh, this is cool. Like, I remember the first year, we had Christian Siriano come and look at Christian now.
Yeah.
Or we had, Kelly Catrone come, legend, and they were like, there's something here. And we, it was kind of the coolest thing because we would have like, emerging designer show, the runway show, and the community would come and it would be so electric, but you would have this like, super young kid with like pink hair and nose pierced. We did one of my favorite shows of all time was Christian Siriano with these like ostentatious large gowns in an East Nashville church that was a historical Black church, kind of run down, but it was awesome. That person sitting next to like this, very well appointed lady that like lived in Belmead, watching the same show. Right? Together. And it brought everybody together. And it was just like this really cool opportunity and everybody was excited. But what really brought us together was we weren't just doing events just to do events. Sure, that built community and that was electric, but it was about investing in the future of fashion. Like we knew that like, so many people recognize fashion as like an art form or a creative outlet. But fashion is one of the biggest global industries in the world, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's not going anywhere.
No.
It's a business.
It's always evolving. It's always changing. It's always something new or something old coming back again. It's always that.
That part. But it's not recognized necessarily. I mean, it is in the major, spheres of business. So we were like, how do we invest and nurture talent so that they invest in their business, they invest in their craft? And so we started the fund and we would literally grant money to emerging talent every year from the funds that we would raise from our events and our efforts. And, they would take the funds and like they would go to, different places around the world and invest in their businesses. They would go to like Copenhagen to a sustainable fashion summit or like London or, et cetera, and do all these different things. New York. It was just a cool way to give back. And so through the years, it's evolved. I think reimagining what it looks like. COVID kind of hit us hard. I mean, we planned that year several times and had to cancel the tornado. And we've done some programming since then. I think with the fashion industry, it's like, even with New York and everything, how that's changes, fashion shows relevance have changed. It's like is it actually going to change and evolve a designer's business? I don't know. Is it going to help the bottom line? What is actually going to change the bottom line, or what's going to evolve a fashion brand's business? And let me say this too. There was such a focus on just designers. I think as we evolve Fashion Fund and what the programming can look in fashion, we have to be clear that fashion is not just designers.
Right.
It's stylists. Right. It's photographers. Yeah. It's content creators. Yes. It's hair and makeup. Right? It's everyone that's not necessarily in front of. It's models, right? It's editors. It's all these things. And so, we did some stuff recently with the Country Music Hall of Fame that was revolved around stylists. We did some stuff last year, which was around a film with Beth Ann Hardison.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember.
Featuring some Black creators and Black in fashion. And we're doing some different things. I think right now, myself and Connie Cathcart Richardson and McLean Richardson, who are still involved with Nashville Fashion Forward Fund and National Fashion Week, we're still the OGs as part of the original group. It's just kind of reimagining, what does the Nashville Fashion Forward Fund look like moving forward? What does our programming look like? The good news is the funds that we've raised are perpetual. So it sits at the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. Our current fund winner she's incredible. I absolutely love her. She has Paper Doll Factory. She's originally from Atlanta, but I've got her in Nashville. She actually worked on the campaign with me, and she is actually going to use the funds in a very innovative way. You have to meet her. She actually should be on the podcast.
Yeah.
I call her Riri, Ruby Daniels, but she's amazing. And she's somebody else that I think everybody should be paying attention to.
I love that. And what I love most is you guys' ability to make such a staple, an imprint here in Nashville with crafting space for fashion.
Yeah.
Because we see every day that fashion it's a statement. It's a part of our lives.
Yeah.
And for me, being a Nashville native, and even though in 2008 and 2010, I was much younger than what I am now, it was still the principle of knowing growing up, I didn't see a lot of fashion expression here in Nashville. But now, and I highly advise anyone watching this podcast, go and follow Nashville Fashion Week, because you guys illustrate so much in the importance of fashion. And I love that you've crafted that space here in Nashville, because people need it. Thank
you.
Yeah.
And I think too, reimagining what it looks like. And it's not to say we're not going to do runway shows moving forward. I even like what you're doing. I've had some people approach and say, do you guys do content moving forward? Is it a podcast? I don't know.
Would be great.
Is it a show? And maybe that's a part of it. For me, I think it's more about creating diverse opportunities. Again, I'm really particular in making sure that the representation, and not just in the people, but the product. Again, it's not, there's so many people, and I don't blame Project Runway on this. I think it was a great vehicle in showing the fashion industry. But I'm just so adamant about, hey guys, fashion is not just designers, okay? It's retailers, it's stylists, it's the hair and makeup people, it's editors, nail techs. I mean, it's just like when people talk about music, it's like, guys, it's not just the singer.
Yeah.
It's the session players in the studios,
and
right?
we know all the songwriters, they're the ones making the big bucks,
right?
know? Yeah.
And we need to lobby too. I know I'm involved in, the political sphere as well. It can't just be, and I've been lobbying a lot in the fashion industry in the last few years. We had the CFDA come down. I've been talking within Metro government. There's a lot of funding that goes into the music industry. There's some that's starting to come to the film, not enough. But, there's a music, film, and entertainment council. And, there's some controversy with Metro Arts going on right now, but there needs to be more funding going into fashion, right?
Yeah.
If the world is, if it's one of the largest industries in the world, and if there's all of this other, demonstrative support for the fashion industry, I don't understand how in Nashville, in such a culture-driven city, how we can't get more support for fashion, and still so many people see it as like a frivolous thing or just an art form.
And I want to say I commend you for that fight because, again, it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when that time comes, people will be able to understand why it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, you could be a partner in this. I'm just saying this. It's not like shots fired. People use fashion as a tool. Like, when you go to concerts, these artists are not naked on stage, right?
No. Well,
well,
nowadays, which I have to ask you about this. We see fashion has evolved.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you what trends in fashion is an absolute no-no. It's trashy. It needs to go. But what maybe could stay? We need to go back to. What do you think?
I cannot. I will say, and this is like, okay, we're kind of reflected on it. I got the memo a long time. It's been around for a little too long. And I love it. Look, I love a good like legless look for sure. But the whole like not wearing pants, it had its moment. Beyonce did it. We did it for Gaga. We did it for a minute. It looked great. But everybody, like now we're just coming out and like looking like gymnastics experts on stage at all times. Like I would like to see a pant on stage or like, full on.
And maybe because I think of fashion, when I think of fashion, I like the era of like Diane Carroll, Sidney Poitier.
I love it. The dapperness.
Yes.
Come to dress.
Yes. Everyone was classic. Sex appeal was still there, but it was still very much so classic. But I feel like now,
yep.
You can wear a fishnet and,
You and I are on the same page. You know what I was going to say? I feel like we're locked and loaded here. Yeah. So a piece of advice that my mother gave me that I take with me every day, and my friends will confirm this, I will feel like garbage. And no matter what, it will be after a long trip. It could be from a Vegas trip. It could be from a long retreat. We could be kikiing the night before, but I will still show up this way. The advice that my mom gave me, and I will take it to the grave, is when you travel, look put together. That is the piece of advice. Like, I will not show up at an airport in sweatpants. I will not show up at an airport with flip-flops. I will not show up at an airport in my pajamas. I will not look unkept. Like, I will always look put together, and they will make fun of me. They're like, "Are you wearing heels right now?" And I'm like, "I am wearing heels. I'm wearing a blazer, or I will have a trench coat on. Maybe I'll wear jeans, but I'll have like a nice, like I'll wear something like this, or dress. I will always look polished when I go to the airport, because you never know who you will run into. I don't know. I was always brought up that way. Maybe that's old school, but like, back in the day, you travel, you look
the part. You were dapper. You carried yourself with a sense of essence.
That's right. You don't travel like with like sweatpants, flops.
And I think, and while
hoodie.
I'm not downing it, I do feel like there is a sense of people are not taken seriously because of how they're first represented. First impressions are very important. We all know that. So if you go around, you don't keep up your hygiene, you're going to important places and you just don't care. Those things say a lot about how you think about yourself, what you believe about yourself. So showing up is important. I don't care where we are in life, no matter how much we evolve in fashion, showing up is important.
Okay, the last dig I have, and this is for real, and I can't believe people are still wearing this. It's been in my gut for like years. I thought for sure they would have died by now. So I don't understand how people are paying hundreds, and I pay a lot for shoes, but like hundreds and hundreds of dollars for these ugly sneakers. The Golden Goose.
I know exactly.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
What
I'm talking
about.
I thought they would have died like 4 years ago. I mean, they're just. I know I'm going to get some shade for this.
Well,
they're going to comment in the comment section. Just hide them from me because I'm going to get a lot of hate, probably. And I know who's going to comment on it. Not my crowd. They're going to get a lot. Oh, boy. Just, I don't get it. I don't get it. They're like distressed in like $800 and
It's not worth it.
the stars and garbage.
Yeah. I want to talk more about your position. You serve as the senior advisor for the campaign, How Nashville Moves. You work closely with Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell. Can you share details pertaining to the status of the transit plan? What words of comfort can you provide for individuals both in support and those who are not in support?
Okay, so it passed.
Yes.
Well, I was asked to be a senior advisor on the How Nashville Moves campaign, and that was such a joy to work on because it's, a transit referendum has been something that Nashville has not been able to pull off for, dang near 2 decades now. It's been something that our city has needed for a very long time. And there's been failed attempts. Since I've been here, Mayor Carl Dean was a huge transit supporter and had some great ideas and started doing some work. And then Mayor Megan Barry, unfortunately, her referendum didn't pass. And so I was part of the Mayor Cooper administration as well and worked in that office and, really enjoyed my time there. And Mayor Freddie O'Connell has been a friend of mine. And so when he asked me to join the efforts of the campaign, I was just like, hell yeah, let's go. Let's move. And so we did a mad dash and did a lot of work. I joined and did about 6 months of work. And, to reach over 600,000 constituents in a period of time was a lot. But I will say it took a community effort, and we had a lot of partners in the community. And so we did a tremendous amount of outreach, of reaching voters. There was a lot of community efforts, like through some of our partners, like anyone from like the Equity Alliance and Turk and Stand Up Nashville, NOAA, and other groups as well. So we really banded together, and it was overwhelming to have equity of mind to say, hey, if Nashville is going to continue to grow as a city, then we need to make sure that everyone has a real shot to live here in a way that will be fruitful for all. And also, if we're wanting to continue to be successful in all the ways that we want to be, then we gotta keep it moving, right? Yeah. And it's not just about buses. Like, yes, we need more buses, but it's about, I don't know about you, Chris, but I don't like sitting in traffic.
I'm not a fan of it, especially because I live like 45 minutes outside the city limits.
That part. So like just, on average to get like 56 to 60 hours of your life back each year. Giggle, right? I'm like, what would you do with that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then there's just so many other things that benefit, like, having more sidewalks in your neighborhoods, which are just a basic thing. And I like to point this out too. It's just like, that affords other things in the operating budget for things like schools and safety. And so, there were a lot of things on the ballot this year for the election on November 5th. I don't know, like presidential and, things in Congress and things like that. And we were the very last thing on the ballot. So we were anxious. We were thinking, are people going to stick around and vote for it? And I am very proud to say that Nashvillians overwhelmingly stood together and said, let's do this. We're going to invest in ourselves as people and as a city. And, we had like 65% of the vote, which is insane, which is absolutely just, it makes me smile.
Feel? Yeah. It makes you smile.
It makes me happy because it's not just like, oh, we won. It's just, it makes me happy to think that this is transformative change, not just for you and me, Chris. It's transformative change for the generation after us and the generation after us. Like, this is something that, is historic and we can feel good about, but that will forever change our city in such a positive way. And we were a part of that.
Yeah.
We chose to invest in ourselves. And so it's, we had the right person to lead that effort, Mr. Mayor Freddie O'Connell. And I'm very proud of my friend, and I'm very proud that the work we did, and now it's implementing it, and the work has already started. And so I'm going to reflect back as a person and be very thankful that I was asked to be part of that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to rest up.
Because I know you were tired on the go. And yeah.
It was a lot. I think, getting off that campaign trail, there's such a high, but they were very long days.
Yeah.
Extremely long days. But there's nothing that beats doing your civic duty and giving back to your community in a way like that way. So I'll look back and be very proud of what we did.
I love that. And I have to talk about this because you're also the CEO of Roar Nashville. Again, you have so many different titles, so many different things. And I know there's not enough time to get it all in one episode, but I want to highlight all of the amazing things that you are doing and how you've been able to not only evolve from those things, but tie in a piece of everything together to where it all meshes into one. So can you talk about Roar Nashville as well?
Thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, Roar, Roar is my firm. I'm a solopreneur. And I always say we, which I have a hard time saying I. I see. We is a word that I always use. I'm just a very collaborative person, but I'm a solopreneur, and it's because I work with people. It's not just me. I'm the one that's leading the charge for Roar, but I work with others. And so Roar started in 2017. I've been an entrepreneur, like I said, for my 20s, but basically what Roar is I do strategy, communications, I can do events, and obviously now I do policy and political consulting as well. But I get the easiest way when people are like, what do you do? And this is not an elegant way of saying it, but I get shit done. At the end of the day, I get shit done. And I think the thing that I'm very thankful for is since I've started, I've never had to go out and ask for a business. It's always come to me because, my work speaks for itself.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been referred in, and I've been very thankful for that. And, I just keep my head down. I continue to do the work, and it's been great. I've had the blessing, really, of being able to work with anything from startups and nonprofits to global brands to campaigns, lifestyle brands, entertainment, fashion. And it's been a really cool journey, and it's not stopping anytime soon. And so currently, I'm taking a little time to breathe and do cool things like podcasts, but I've had a lot of people reach in, and I'm looking at projects that I'm working on next, and I'm very excited about the future. And again, the life of an entrepreneur, it never stops.
That's right.
But it's a really cool place to be able to work on projects that I want to work on. And I'm very, very thankful for that. But I will also say that I'm not lucky. I've positioned myself and done the work so that I am afforded that opportunity. And I think that many people can do the same thing. You just gotta do the work.
I love that. And as we conclude today, I want to say to you, I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
Just for this short time here, I can tell that you've put in so much work and effort, and it comes from a really raw and real place. And I'm very proud of you of all of the things you've been able to accomplish. And I want to affirm in you that we were talking about this before we started filming, that sometimes people are easily intimidated by you because of all of the amazing things that are going on in your life. And I call it God moving in your life. So people are intimidated by that because they feel that naturally and within you, right? So what I'm saying is continue to move from that space. Even though it's not hard to hold your head up high, continue to move from that space because I see it's working for you.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. That means a lot. There's good energy. And I think, Chris, I say this affectionately, real sees real. We feel each other, and you're definitely one of the real ones. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for those watching today, where can they follow you, keep up with all of the amazing things you have going on? And also, what is your social media handles?
Yeah. My social media handle is at Masulla, Masulla. I show a lot of what I support and the work I do. There's also a lot of hot mess with my two dogs on there. You'll see I live vicariously a lot of my personality quirks through my two dogs. Okay, you ready? Reggie and Kamala Harris. She goes, you have to say both. They're like, Kamala. I'm like, she doesn't answer that. It's Reggie and Kamala Harris. But yeah, you can follow me on there, and it's always a good time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. And until next time.